Welcome to Mikun's Hardware. In this video I'm going to provide you detailed review of the Huananzhi X99-TF version 1.1 motherboard. Let's start with the specification first. The motherboard is designed for the Intel LGA 2011 3rd version socket. It supports Intel Core i7-5000 and 6000 processors as well as Intel Xeon E5 3rd version and 4th version. The motherboard supports quad-channel RAM, DDR4 or DDR3. It supports both desktop and server-registered ECC RAM. You cannot combine DDR3 and DDR4 though, and DDR3 is only working with a specific set of Intel Xeon E5 3rd version processors. Full list of these CPUs can be found in the video description. The gray slots of the motherboard are designed specifically for DDR3, and the black slots are for DDR4. The motherboard has 4 rear USB 3 ports and 2 front USB ports. It has 4 rear USB 2 and 4 front USB 2. There is also 8 SATA 3 ports, 2 4-pin headers, 2 3-pin headers, 3 PCI Express x16, 2 PCI Express x1, 2 NVMe M.2 slots, but only one of them is PCI Express 3. It's the one which is closer to the CPU. The one which is under the graphics card is PCI Express version 2. This means that the fast SSDs are gonna work half the speed. You can still utilize the second slot for slower NVMe drives which are available for cheap from AliExpress. There is also available 5.1 audio, LAN port, and 2 PS2 ports. The VRM cooling is unfortunately active and consists of 2 annoying fans, which sometimes may produce some stretch sounds. Let's move on to the motherboard test results. The motherboard was tested with the Xeon E5-2640 V3 and Core i7-6800k. Core i7-6800k was working perfectly fine with the following RAM specification. 2 sticks by 8GB each, DDR4 2133 CL14 was working stable at DDR4 2600 CL17. 4 sticks DDR4 3200 CL14 was working stable at DDR4 2600 CL13. I was able to tighten the timings even more, but unfortunately it was not stable out of the box and I didn't have much time to tickle and figure out which timings would work. All I know is that this RAM is a very good Samsung B-die kit which was specifically designed for AMD Ryzen, and it can go as high as 3600 megatransfers, but on this motherboard and with this processor, the RAM speed is limited to DDR4 2600. Unfortunately, with 4 sticks of 16GB each DDR4 3000 CL16, the system was not stable at all. I have tried to use this motherboard and these RAM sticks with the i7-6800k with a different configuration, with a stock and adjusted timings and adjusted frequency. Unfortunately, the system was crashing every now and then. Sometimes it was refusing to boot and sometimes it was refusing to properly shut down. This motherboard does not support RAM overclocking with the Xeon 2600 series processors. That's why the RAM with the Xeon E5-2640 V3 was working at DDR4 1866. I did not spend time tightening timings because I did not have time for that, and I was focusing on testing the motherboard, not the RAM and not the CPU. That's why all the configuration tested were working at default CL13 times. The following configurations were tested: 4 sticks by 8GB each DDR4 3200, 4 sticks by 8GB each DDR4 2400 CL17 ECC registered RAM, 2 sticks by 16GB each DDR4 2133 CL15 ECC registered RAM, 2 sticks by 32GB each DDR4 2666 CL19 ECC registered RAM. As well, I have tested combination of 2 sticks by 16GB and 2 sticks by 32GB for total of 96GB of RAM, which makes me believe that this motherboard would host 128GB RAM with no problem. If I install 2 sticks of RAM, I get dual channel configuration. If I install 4 sticks, I'm getting quad channel RAM configuration. This is the first Chinese X99 motherboard which has properly working USB 3.0 ports. I did not even have to install any kind of drivers. Windows 10 was automatically picking up correct drivers, and USB 3.0 ports are working perfectly fine. I have tested the rear side ports as well as the front panel side ports. For the testing, I was using Crystal Disk Mark and my Samsung T5 external SSD drive. SATA 3 ports are also working perfectly fine. I was able to connect my Samsung SSD to almost every of the ports. I was randomly connecting to different ports and I did not get any malfunctioning port. Everything was fine. CPU fan headers, which are 4-pin, are also working fine, and it's possible to manually control the fan speed as well as automatically adjust it using the smart function. As we can see, the speed of the fans is regulated according to the CPU temperature, going up and down. Unfortunately, I do not have 3-pin fans at my disposal to be able to test how the 3-pin connectors work, but I suspect that speed of the 3-pin fans is not regulatable. PCI Express Type 16 ports all work of them, but it's important to know that only 2 of the ports are available for the CPUs which have 28 PCI Express lanes. For example, my Core i7-6800k has only 28 PCI Express lanes. That's why the third PCI Express port is not available, and it's not possible to install anything in that port. Only the first 2 are available for the disposal for the CPUs with 28 PCI Express lanes. If you're installing a CPU with 40 PCI Express lanes, for example Xeon E5-2640 V3 or Xeon E5-1650 V3, all 3 PCI Express lanes will be available for your expansion cards, but you have to manually configure how much bandwidth you want to allocate for each port. For example, when I was installing 2 graphics card and external adapter for NVMe SSD drive, the default configuration of the PCI Express lanes was completely wrong. I have got 4 PCI Express lanes for my graphics card, then 16 PCI Express lanes for my SSD expansion card, and 4 PCI Express lane for the second graphics card. If I manually go to the BIOS and configure how I want to allocate PCI Express lanes, everything working as expected. Both of the M.2 slots are working fine, but as mentioned before, only one of the slots is PCI Express 3rd version. It's the one which is closer to the CPU. The one which is under the graphics card is PCI Express 2.0. That's why the bandwidth in the second slot is half as much as the first slot. If you have a fast PCI Express SSD, make sure to install it into the first location, which is closer to the CPU. Now let's talk about some of the motherboard features. First of all, Windows Sleep Mode works fine. Linux is supported. I was able to install Linux and boot into the Linux. No issues here. Booting from NVMe drive also working fine. Turbo Boost is working according to the specification. My Intel Xeon E5-2640 V3 was boosting to 3.4 GHz when one core utilized and 2.8 GHz when all of the cores were utilized. i7-6800k was behaving a bit weird. It was boosting to 6.8 GHz turbo on one core and 3.5 GHz turbo on all cores. According to the specification, it's supposed to boost to 3.6 and 3.4 GHz, but more is better, of course. It is possible to unlock turbo boost on this motherboard, but unfortunately in my case my motherboard had locked BIOS. I had to use my programmer to reflash the BIOS, and only after that Turbo Boost Unlocked worked for me. Anyway, Xeon E5-2640 V3 at 3.4 GHz on all cores is a very nice CPU at its price. Currently it's costing only about $50–60 which is a very nice price for this CPU. CPU overclocking is not working on this motherboard. Yes, I know that some of the other YouTubers are reporting that it's possible to overclock CPU on this motherboard if the CPU has unlocked multiplier. Maybe that's the case with the Xeon E5-1650 V3. If I will be able to get such CPU, I will be testing it. But with my i7-6800k, overclocking is not working properly, and I will talk about it a bit later. RAM overclocking is only working with the processors which have unlocked multiplier. With my i7-6800k, I was able to achieve DDR4 2600. Anything faster than that was not booting up. Xeon E5-2640 V3 does not support any kind of RAM overclocking, and RAM was working at the stock frequencies of 1866 megatransfers. Much to my surprise, it's actually possible to configure RAM timings in the BIOS, and the configuration are actually working. There is not many options though. You will not be able to configure secondary, ternary and even more detailed settings, but the main timings are there and you can configure them according to the specification of your RAM sticks, or you can try to tighten the timings. It's working perfectly fine. VRAM thermal performance is okay. The problem is that the VRAM has two active fans which are producing a very annoying sound. When I received my motherboard, it was extremely disgusting sound, like tick 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 tick, but after a while the sound went away and now it's okay to bear with it. A few more issues were detected with this motherboard. The temperature sensors still do not work. I know that many people are reporting that temperature sensors are working for them. Apparently there are different batches of this motherboard and I have got an early sample or some kind of a malfunctioning version because overclocking does not work and temperature sensors are also not showing proper values. The other issues I have got is that motherboard fails to pulse with AMD Radeon RX 560 graphics card. I suspect that this is because the graphics card does not have external power connectors and it's sucking a bit too much power from the PCI Express slot, which motherboard cannot deliver. With any other graphics card I have tested the motherboard, it was working fine. I have tested the motherboard with the GTX 1060, GTX 1050 Ti and some old AMD graphics cards. First of all, let's take a look how the Intel Core i7-6800k behaves at the stock settings. Using the Intel Extreme Tunity utility, I was able to lock the CPU at 3.8 GHz. All of the cores were boosting up to 3.8 GHz when one or all of the cores are utilized. With such configuration, we have 480 points in single-threaded performance using CPU Z benchmark and 3400 points when using all the cores. If I try to increase the CPU clock beyond 3.8 GHz using Intel Extreme Tunity utility, it's simply not applied and completely ignored. I have searched through the internet and read quite some threads and watched a few videos to figure out how to overclock unlocked CPUs on this motherboard. There is a BIOS which is supposed to unlock the features for overclocking the CPU. But unfortunately, even after flashing this BIOS on this motherboard, I still do not have the corresponding BIOS settings to actually overclock the CPU. Still, if I apply all the other recommended settings in the BIOS to overclock the CPU, Intel Extreme Tunity utility lets me increase the core clock speed beyond 3.8 GHz, and I was running stable at 4.1 GHz all-core turbo. But unfortunately, it completely screws up single-core performance. Somehow it happens that if I enable those settings in the BIOS, the turbo boost for a single core is not working properly, and we are just getting 216 points for a single-threaded performance in CPU Z benchmark. And we can see that CPU is not boosting up to 4.1 GHz or anywhere near when just one core is utilized. When all the cores are utilized, the CPU is turbo boosting properly to 4.1 GHz and we are getting 3600 points when compared to the 3400 previous result. I'm not sure if this problem is because I'm not able to access the missing BIOS settings, or this is the problem because of Intel Core i7-6800k processor. All the reports that I was able to find online were gathered with the Xeon E5-1640 V3. This is an unlocked processor, but it's one generation behind 6800K, and maybe that generation CPUs are working better on this motherboard. I'm not sure. If I will be able to get 1650 V3 on my hands, I will definitely test it and check it. But so far, I can conclude that 6800K with this particular motherboard does not work properly when overclocked. Again, maybe this is just my particular motherboard from old batch, or maybe this is a little defective motherboard, I don't know. But if you're buying this motherboard, be ready that you might get into such a lottery and in such situation that overclocking might be malfunctioning. Let's take a look at some gaming benchmark. For this benchmark, I'm running Red Dead Redemption 2 built-in benchmark I have 3 rounds between Core i7-6800k with the stock settings and turbo boosting to 3.8 GHz, Xeon E5-2640 V3 at stock settings with 1 core turbo to 3.4 GHz and all core turbo to 2.8 GHz, and Xeon E5-2640 V3 with the turbo boost unlocked with all cores turbo to 3.4 GHz. Please ignore the minimum FPS value here because the benchmark is not very consistent and these minimum FPS spikes are sometimes jumping to 40 FPS and sometimes dipping as low as 9. Let's rather focus on the average FPS. What we can see here is, very much to my surprise, i7-6800k has the lowest average FPS among the 3 tests. 65 FPS on average for 6800K, 69 FPS on average for default Xeon E5-2640, and 70 average FPS for a Xeon E5-2640 with unlocked turbo boost. What we can see that maximum FPS is highest on i7-6800K. This is probably happen at some scenes which are not utilizing many CPU threads but require CPU frequency. And i7-6800K with a slightly higher frequency is able to provide slightly higher maximum frame rates. Xeon E5-2640 with the default settings is only able to provide 104 maximum FPS, but as soon as we unlock turbo boost, it goes up to 125 maximum FPS, which is basically the same as i7-6800K. My conclusion here is that even if you are not able to unlock turbo boost on your Xeon E5-2640 V3, you are not losing that much in gaming. Average FPS in this particular game has just changed from 69 to 70 FPS. It's not a big difference. The other thing is that if you're doubting which CPU to buy, Xeon E5-2640 V3 or Xeon E5-1650 V3, I would definitely go for Xeon E5-2640 V3 because it's half the price. Current prices are around 50 euros or $55 compared to Xeon E5-1650 V3, which is currently being sold for around 100 euros or $110. Now it's time to get some kind of a conclusion for this motherboard. Currently the motherboard is being sold for 95 to 120 euros, which is a bit too much I believe for this motherboard. If it would be on sale for, let's say, 80-85 euros, I would be able to give it a way higher score, but with such price I can give it only 6 out of 10. And unfortunately, as any other Chinese motherboard, this is a kind of a lottery. My particular motherboard does not work properly well with the CPU overclocking, and it also had BIOS locked out of the box, so I was not able to unlock turbo boost using FPT tool or any other software. I had to use my USB programmer to flash the BIOS chip in order to be able to unlock turbo boost. On the pros side, we are having many expansion slots. It supports 128 gigs of RAM, it looks nice, it has integrated I/O shield, it supports DDR3 RAM and DDR4 RAM. On the bad sides, we are having CPU overclocking problems, limited RAM problems, broken temperature sensors, very annoying small VRM cooling fans, GPU and RAM compatibility issues. For me, this motherboard did not work with RX 560 graphics card, which does not have external power connector, and did not work stable with the 4 sticks of 16GB DDR4 3000 G-Skill memory. Thus, you decide yourself. If you want to buy it, it's up to you. I cannot recommend it, but I also cannot discourage you from buying this motherboard. It definitely serving its purpose, it's working well with the Xeon E5-2640 V3, but always check prices online and see maybe you can get a better deal. Remember that AM4 platform is a much newer, much better platform, and you don't have to bother with the turbo boost unlock. Maybe in your case, Ryzen 5 2600 is gonna be a better option. Also take a look at Ryzen 5 3500X. It's such a beast CPU for its price. Currently on AliExpress you can get it for just 100-110 euros. And for this price, this CPU is excellent. It performs very well in games and you have an upgrade path to go up to 16 core, 32 threads, Ryzen 9 3950X. It's a beast of a CPU. Of course, right now they are being a bit expensive, but in the future the price is gonna drop and you're gonna stay on the modern platform. From the alternatives, we still have Huananzhi X99-F8, Huananzhi X99-M8, Machinist X99Z. Huananzhi X99-M8 and Machinist X99Z already on my hands and I will be testing and providing reviews shortly. Regarding Turbo Boost Unlock, if you're interested, I will make a separate dedicated video explaining how exactly unlock Turbo Boost on this motherboard. If you're interested, Geekbench 5 and user benchmark results running Huananzhi X99-TF with the Xeon E5-2640 V3 and 16GB of DDR4 ECC RAM are available in the video description. That's all I have for you today. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, goodbye.